We are honored to have all of you with us for the first workshop of the Sri Ram Research Festival, organized in association with IBM, a global leader in the cloud and cognitive solution space, serving clients in more than 170 countries with a vision to drive progress through innovation and action. The information age that we live in has seen rapid advancements in technology over the past few years, which has revolutionized the ways businesses operate. Machines and robots have made it possible for us to carry out tasks at a speed and scale that human minds are incapable of. While technology was initially used to perform mundane routine tasks, their scope has expanded beyond with the development of AI and cognitive applications that possess the ability to reason and think and can learn from their past actions. At this juncture, it is important for businesses to explore and incorporate the usage of AI so that they can disrupt and not be disrupted. With this in mind, the topic for today's workshop is business applications of AI and cognitive learning. It is our pleasure to introduce you all to Mr. Abhinav Vij, the AI and analytics lead of IBM Consulting in India. Mr. Vij started his journey as the advanced analytics lead for ICICI Bank before moving into the AI-led consulting industry at Accenture. He's an analytics industry veteran who has worked across multiple industries, including financial services, retail, utilities, and communications, and across geographies globally. Recently, he led the setup of an AI plus data business focused on the use of new age data and cutting edge analytics to solve unique problems which arose due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you so much, sir, for being with us here today. It is truly an honor for us to be hosting you. Few instructions before we begin with the workshop. The audience should feel free to put their questions into the Q&A box. And since sir wants the session to be interactive, so do reply to his questions in the Q&A box itself, and please remain muted during the entire duration of the program. Thank you. Sir, over to you.
Thanks, Nikunj, for the wonderful introduction, both to the topic and for myself. I don't need to cover my background now. Thanks a lot for that quick debrief, and really excited and honored to be invited to this session. And as always, eager young minds are what can create new ideas, and I'll be happy to understand what your thoughts are and learn from you as well. I'm hoping I can share some of my knowledge with you guys. But the idea also is let's make this as interactive as we can. I would also love to take away something from the session as well, right? So feel free to chime in, use the chat or the Q&A box as much as you want to while we're talking through this. I'll make sure I'll give enough time during the slides. There'll be some points which will be debatable, some controversial ideas as well, which I'll talk about. So I'm sure there's going to be some amount of discourse on that. And yeah, Nikunj, I'm hoping you'll be able to help me out if there's a pointed question or a comment that comes through, which you want me to address on those slides. Yeah, so don't wait till the end of the presentation. We'll have around 10-15 minutes for any open-ended discussion. But if you want to have a dialogue about a particular topic we're talking about today, feel free to interrupt me. Yeah. Perfect. So let's get started. So from Nikunj, just before I think most of you joined in, I did try to understand who all we have in the session. So it seems like we have people from different and diverse backgrounds, both from the current course of study as well as what their aspirations might be. So what I want to do today is let's start with some grounding of what AI is, right? And make sure that all of us understand what that term means, because it can have different definitions in different contexts, and each one of us carries our own perception of what analytics or AI is, right? And for me also, the definition for it evolves and changes every year, right? With a lot of exciting stuff happening in that space. So let me begin by showing you guys a few examples, and you tell me what the application of AI is in these 4 scenarios. So the first one is you go to Amazon and you start shopping for things. Any thoughts or ideas on how analytics or AI is applied when you use Amazon app or Flipkart or any of the other shopping apps that you have? Feel free to comment and chime in, and I'll tell you what I know of the business and where it is applied, and we'll discuss ideas that you guys share as well. So any thoughts on where you think or what the use of AI or analytics might be when you go to Amazon? Do you see any intelligence, something smart, something which you had not expected come up? Yeah, so I see Paki says that it suggests products based on your previous searches. A recommendation engine is AI. Perfect. Curation of recommendations. Yeah, perfect. I think those are absolutely right. I think the nuance, when it started off, Amazon, it was a pure play recommendation engine, right? Which basically looks at people like you, what shopping patterns have they shown. If you've looked at a category, then other people who looked at a similar category in the past, then what else did they buy, right? Or what else did they look at when they were trying to go through that purchase journey, right? That's one part of it. The other piece also is the intelligence on understanding consumer behavior, right, or human behavior as well. So there are ways in which they can nudge you. There are ways in which they understand human pattern of interaction, which they use to design the entire shopping experience. So absolutely right. The recommendation engine is the one which is basically behind the Amazon searches that are done, right? Let's look at another example, Spotify. Now, Spotify or Ghana or Savan, any thoughts on what is happening there in the back? Personalized playlist, yes. Paki is recommending the last one. The chatbot is also an AI, yes. Filter songs according to our preferences. Preferences is an interesting topic, right? So one is preferences based on, typically it used to be preferences based on genre you're listening to, a singer that you have an interest in, or for example, language of that song that is there, right? There is also now intelligence baked in to the kind of tempo, the theme, the mood, I think like Hardik is saying, is also now baked into which kind of songs are recommended, right? So you would have seen playlists which come up, which are, say, for example, relaxing. There are themes which come up which are more about exercising and fitness. Those are still based on simple things like what people might have put or labeled them as. But there is also now an understanding using deep learning on the way the sound comes out and the frequency of those modulations, which kind of songs tend to be listened together, right? So high tempo songs or when there is a lot of beats involved, right? So trying to understand that and then giving recommendations based on that is also something that is done over and above. So if I have 5 songs in my playlist, these are the 5 which typically go, right? Which is like a recommendation engine that we had earlier. So there is the application of the same concept, but now it is in audio, right? So good. Third one is you go to any website, you may or may not go to Times of India or Cricinfo or any other portal that you go to. Typically, when you go, you would have seen that when a page loads, right, between the time everything that is visible on the page, there is literally like a millisecond of time, you'll see these gray boxes that are there, right? Now there is something very intelligent happening in the background, and then you see an ad come up, right, which might be at the top of the page, it might be on the side, it might be a pop-up, right? Now, what is the kind of intelligence that is going in behind uh, that page? So Paki is saying it's Google Ads based on cookies. Yes, that's a medium of it. But what's the intelligence behind showing these ads? Yes. So Jwala says you see a product somewhere and then now in every website it is available, right? So Amazon, I might have been looking for furniture or I might have been looking for a new phone. Now every other website that I go to, I see the ad for the same phone. Sometimes even when I purchase and close the transaction with Amazon, I keep on seeing it for a week's time till something new pops up, right? So that's one, there is linkage there. So some way data is flowing from Amazon or some other places to Times of India or Cricinfo, and they're able to show the right ad. But there is something even more interesting that's happening in the background. Okay, so let me talk about it. So literally, every time you load a page, for you, there is a bidding war which is going in the background in those few milliseconds. So there are firms and there are bidding platforms for it, like Trade Desk and all, where firms actually bid for what is the value of showing this ad to you. So to be fair, the value of your mind space, right? How valuable your time is when you see this ad. So firms who have, for example, known that, say, for example, I'm going to put Nikunj on the spot here. Nikunj has been searching for a new smartphone, and on Amazon, he searched, on Flipkart, he looked at the rates, but he didn't close the purchase, right? Now, both Amazon and Flipkart know that Nikunj is in the market for a phone. Now, when Nikunj goes to Cricinfo on the page or Times of India, both Amazon and Flipkart will bid on him. A few rupees, maybe not thousands, but a few rupees or paise, saying it's important for me to show this ad to Nikunj. So I'm going to bid 2 rupees for Nikunj. Whoever bids higher in those few milliseconds gets the opportunity to show the ad to Nikunj, right? The intelligent part is how much do you bid and which customers do you bid in on? And if you're bidding, then what product to show? So the ads are customized, as you were saying, right? So if you saw a phone, or you were looking for stationery or anything, or clothes even, right? The ads are very customized, but the intelligence is how much should I bid and which all places should I bid. So when, for example, if I am seeing this ad in the morning, is it likely to be more impactful that somebody will buy? Or if it is in the evening when somebody has more time and is in a leisurely mood, for, I think for you guys as well, I think it spans across, right? So when is the right time for this demographic to actually take a decision on purchasing something, right? So that's the intelligence behind. And then I think somebody said, right, the linking of data from the origin, which is, say, for example, Amazon or Flipkart, that data then flows in through these bidding platforms into these websites like Times of India or Cricinfo. Then there is a question that how do they decide whose bidding is more important? It depends. So there is a model which looks at what is your likelihood of purchase. So Nikunj might have been casually browsing. He has a habit. He's a techie who really likes to keep updated about phones and prices. So he might have been casually browsing. And if you keep on doing that multiple times, they know he's a casual browser, not going to buy, right? Versus, say, for example, Jwala, who's for sure going to look at buying because it's not a regular exercise. But when Jwala is looking at it now and the searches have become more frequent, they have become more precise. So earlier, maybe you were searching for a Motorola phone. Now you're searching for a specific model of Motorola. And you're looking at whether you want to buy a 16 GB or a 32 GB phone, right? So it changes in the way you search, defines how close you are to buying, and that defines which customer you bid on, right? So the person who's likely to bid or buy a product from you, you will have a different bidding strategy versus somebody who is in early stages and you want to just influence and nudge them in the right direction. You'll have a different bidding strategy, right? So it's primarily determined by how you behave and what your history is. Yeah. Last one, which is a bit orthogonal. I don't know if you guys can see it. If you can't, then let me know.
It's clearly visible, sir. I think it's depicting a drone over a field.
Yep, exactly. So any thoughts on how AI would have been used here? For seed distribution, for surveying the field, irrigation, okay. So somewhat right. There is a survey of the field which is happening, but what do you do with that? Protection of crops, yeah, that's also an interesting use case. I'll talk a bit about how to use drones outside of just seeing, but actually doing some physical activities around that. So let me talk about it. Yeah, so 2-3 uses. One is, like you said, surveys. You do survey and try and understand what is happening on the field. But it's primarily used for two purposes. One is to look at the yield that is going to come from these farms, right? So it's usually deployed in large scale farms. where it's important to understand what is the thickness of the growth of the crop, how healthy the crop is, and the expected yield that they will get. And that's used to plan for future supply chain that they want to set up, and also how they want to sell in the market. The second is also to understand if there is a disease or there is any infestation which is happening and impacting these farms, right? So rather than 20 people walking these farms day in, day out, trying to understand, drones are used to capture the image and then analyze and compare it with the past instances of when there have been diseases or infestations which have happened, right? So that's one. I think the other angle of it might be used as a scarecrow. That's an interesting one. Maybe I have not heard of it. Maybe it is still used for that. But the place where a very interesting application of drones is with this emergence of alternate energy, whether it is solar or wind or renewables, basically. With solar panels over a period of time, especially in a country like ours, dust usually settles on top of those panels, right? And when dust settles on top of these panels, the direct impact of that is the amount of energy that you can capture from the sun, or how much electricity you can generate from it, goes down significantly. So one interesting application of drones is actually, one is to survey and see which all of these solar panels are impacted, but also to flip the drone around and then blow the dust away wherever they see a significant problem there, right? So the wind wash from the drone's engine can actually blow away the dust from the solar panels and help with the cleaning. So rather than sending somebody there, a drone can help do that as well. So it may be manual, it may be automated, but that's another orthogonal use of it. So, so I think one good thing is, from what I'm gathering, is there is good idea of what the practical application of AI is, right, in your day-to-day life. I'm sure there are other examples that would come to everyone's mind, right, where they influence and see AI in practice. So, so I think that's happy to hear those where you think there is something unique and interesting where AI is used. But let's move on from this topic, having grounded ourselves in understanding what it is. I'll talk a bit about what we see as a firm in IBM. On most of the firms see now AI as a competitive advantage. So if I look back at my journey as well, 10, 15 years back, it was a very niche skill, right? And firms who were doing AI or analytics were thought to be cutting edge and something which they are doing to differentiate to some extent. But now AI and analytics is like a core function of any organization. So you never used to have chief data officers, you never used to have chief analytics officers 5, 10 years back. It's all something which is more recent, because AI analytics has become a core function for organizations, right? Although that does mean that there is more focus, but it also means that you have to figure out ways on how you can implement it across the organization. So it's no longer about doing a small pilot, showing that this concept works. It's also about how do you go from something which is small scale to something that an entire organization gets, right? I'll skip rest of it. I think that's more of overall view. But when you look at where artificial intelligence is, right, or even where analytics is, right, the current state of it is basically on a very focused set of problems. Try and solve those and do two things. One is using AI become really efficient at one specific area. And by efficient, I mean do it in less time, do it more accurately, right? Or it is to do it at scale, right? So which is, I can now go and expand it thousands of times without worrying about having the right skills and the people to do it. So it's very focused on specific complex issues that need to be solved, right? And it's used to predict outcomes, it's used to classify, it's used to understand behavior. The future vision, obviously, is to completely imitate human behavior and go beyond in terms of what humans can do, and do it faster, do it quicker, bring in new thoughts as well, right? But how far are we from future vision? Do you guys think or do you think we're already there, where computers will be able to imitate, or machines will be able to imitate exactly what humans do in terms of their thinking. Physical ability being all aside, that's all robotics, but just in terms of thinking, the way we think and operate, how far do you think we are, or do you think we're already there in terms of our progress? Is it less than a year, less than 5 years, more than 5 years? Any guesses on how far we are? And there is no right and wrong answer. I don't know the answer as well, when it will hit. Okay. So I think most of the people are saying 5 to 10 years or 5+ years, right? Which is one way to look at it. Okay, perfect. So I'll come back to this question. Let's go ahead and understand what the difference in AI is, right? So if I were to classify capabilities for us as humans across 3 criteria, which is primarily speed, volume, and intelligence, right? There are some places where humans are better, some places where AI is better, right? And AI is about pattern recognition, right? As of now, it is about understanding and imitating and solving complex problems at this point of time, right? So in terms of speed, if you give a specific problem for AI or analytics to solve, it will win hands down in humans. Trained over a period of time, same data and enough data available, they'll beat us hands down, right? So think of 2 years back or 3 years back, you guys, I'm hoping most of you are from Delhi. If you have your driving licenses, well and good. If you don't, then you would have related to this. You used to have these cops who used to sit on intersections or just after the red lights, looking at people who were jumping, or just after a flyover when people were speeding, right? They used to have these speed guns and trying to measure how fast people are going. And they used to catch like 2-3 people every red light, which they are jumping. Or for example, on speeding, right? Maximum probably 5 cars you will see standing next to 4 or 5 cops who are there. But now, and this is what Delhi Walas will also acknowledge, now we have, at least on the ring road, these cameras on these horizontal poles on the roads, which capture you speeding. And we guys, being smart as we are, we slow down from 60 or 70 down to 50, like 100 meters before those cameras. And then once we are beyond that, we start speeding up again. So who do you think will capture more defaulters, right? And behind that camera is AI setting, which automatically captures the license plate, it captures the speed, and it issues challans as well. A human may eventually validate it before it goes out, but the idea being you use AI in that case to do it. So that's an example of using AI at speed and doing it much, much faster, right? Than what a human would be able to do, right? We might think we're very smart, but we get caught quite often. So the second one, that's just an example. And if you guys have other ideas where AI is smarter than humans, we can look at that as well, right? Then there is volume, right? Which is it. Again, AI will win hands down if it can sort through a huge amount of data to identify patterns much more quickly than humans can, right? So I don't know if you've heard of this game called as Go. There was a lot of chatter around it around 3-4 years back, when AlphaGo as an AI system for the first time beat somebody at Go, where so chess has a limited number of combinations of moves you can make in the future, right? Go is literally the number of moves is the number of atoms in the universe, right? So it's very hard for somebody to plan in the future. You look at more of it as a strategy game, where positioning and which all areas you want to concentrate on, where the gaps are, you play it by strategy, right? And AlphaGo, and there is a much more advanced version of it now, which is using raw processing power. It could plan moves ahead. It could also play moves which a human will never comprehend. And that's primarily because the volumes of data and scenarios and cases that it could mine through to identify what is the right strategy to, right? So volumes, AI again wins hands down. Now, where do we actually get better, right? And that is general intelligence, right? Are we better in terms of general intelligence, which is can AI at this point of time hold a conversation which is emotional in nature, right? Or for example, to some extent they can. To be fair, the chatbots are pretty decent at that. But can they look at something which is much more generic in nature, which is say for example, if you have to operate in a completely new environment, right? I moved to a new city, how to navigate, how to understand, I don't know the layouts, there is no data available, then humans will adapt and modify their behavior and manage that, right? While AI will struggle to do that. But if you look at it as a broad generic concept, then general intelligence, humans definitely are better. But within a specific use case, and we'll talk about use cases now, a specific use case, if you train AI in terms of intelligence, they'll again beat humans hands down, right? So for example, when you have credit card applications coming in, which you apply on, or you would apply on if you are not above 18, um, then humans, they used to be called as credit officers, used to look through the application, have some rules in hand, they used to apply that, look at their gut feeling. This applicant who is 25 years old, has been working for couple of years, has X salary, is living in a metro, let me go ahead and give the card to him, right? Versus someone who is 30, has not been in a stable job, doesn't have a good salary, I'll not give the card to him, right? But AI can actually mine through millions and millions of records from the past and figure out who is a good customer for a credit card, who's not, and take that decision with much more bigger context as well as intelligence to define who's a good customer for a bank to bring on, right? So that aspect of where AI can be better is also tied to a specific use case. It is not generic in nature. Yeah. So before I move on, I think the other aspect of, as this goes on, we talked about the time frame, right? So as of now, we are nowhere close to a general intelligence AI, right? So AI, when you think about it, is always been focused on specific problem solving. It's I can't even put a timeline to it, whether it is 5 years, 10 years, or 15 years. If I were to take a guess, if quantum computing comes to a reality in terms of actual use cases, which has seen a lot of progression as well, then there is a good amount of chance that it might happen quicker. But it's still a few years ahead, right? So don't worry if you're worried about the singularity event of Terminator. I don't know if you guys have even seen the movie. It's something from my generation, but there is this point in time when this computer basically takes over the entire technology systems and the human race, right? So that's called a singularity event, when it gains consciousness and decides for itself what is best, right? So that singularity event is still a few years away. So don't worry, don't lose sleep. We're not there yet. Yeah. Okay, so what is important when you look at in terms of usage of AI, right? So when we look at whether AI is better or humans are better, the reality is somewhere, the truth is somewhere in between, right? Like I said, there are a few things humans are really good at, right? Things and a lot of things that machines and algorithms are really good at, right? And in ideal cases, AI is basically augmenting what humans are doing, right? But obviously, this only works when there is some trust between humans and AI, right? Now, trust can mean different things to different people. Trust can be in terms of reliability. So every time, say, for example, if you open Siri, or if you open Alexa, or any of the voice bots that you have, and you give it a command, and every time the action from the other end is completely different. Or for example, if you ask Google to route uh, from your home to your college, and it takes you through Faridabad always, not the right solution, right? So you can't trust if everything is going to be fine with the outcome. So one is reliability, which is very important. The other aspect of it is also the kind of data that AI has access to, right? Which is, how do you ensure and maintain privacy for individuals, make sure their identity is protected, and there are regulations and controls defined around it, right? You always want to have personalizations which are there. I, for example, have disabled personalization for my ads. But it's for a lot of people, they actually do see value and they see personalized ads based on their interest. They click on it and they go and buy as well. So personalization has a huge role to play, but how specific do you want to be, right? And there are multiple case studies for, I think there was a retail chain in early 2010 which applied AI uh, on basically purchase pattern of individuals, and the outcomes were they were sending out offers to people at their homes on things that they have bought or likely to buy, and the rest of the family did not know the stuff that was being bought on, right? So if you look that up, you'll see there's a huge furor around identity and the amount of personalization that you can do, right? So I think that trust is an important part, and it only works if it is there, and humans will find it effective only if that both of them work together, right? The other aspect of AI is, one is you can build the intelligence, you can build the analytics models, which we'll talk about today. Uh, but it also has to work along with automation on the other side, which is basically figuring out if you deploy a model or you build an analytics model, which is predicting one outcome, for example, then either it can go to a human or it can go to a machine, which can automate that entire end-to-end process, right? So for example, now, if you open a bank account with a digital bank, you don't have to go to a branch, you don't have to fill up a form, physical form, you don't have to submit it to a person there, a branch manager, and you don't have to wait for weeks to understand where your application is, right? With a digital bank, and I did this with IDFC recently, which is the entire process of applying for a savings account is online, right, through an app. You don't have to give or submit any physical documents. You take snaps and give it. It automatically decides the entire process of whether they want to give you a credit card or a loan, or how to open a savings account. It decides on KYC. It is all done digitally, right? So that automation is important to make sure that AI is effective, right? And it's effective at scale, right? So although we'll focus today on AI and analytics in this discussion, but just keep in mind that the implementation is as important as the design and the build of it, right? So going on, so as of today, when we think about machine learning or AI, three broad areas that you can look at it. One is very pointed use cases around machine learning where you have a target in mind, right? You have algorithm or an engine behind it, which helps you target that particular problem you're trying to solve. So for example, one target could be what this particular person is likely to buy on Amazon, right? I'm making it a very simple example. So of the 100 things available, which is the one which this person will likely buy? That's an example of a ML model. It could also be for a bank that if this person has a savings account, will he take a personal loan, or will he or she will take a car, or she'll buy a house, right? So what's the right product to pitch to this customer, right? It can also be in terms of what he or she likes in terms of channels. So are you somebody who's very digitally savvy? So if I want to talk to you, should I give you a call on your phone? Should I send you a WhatsApp? Should I send you an email? What should I be doing, right? So that's all machine learning, right? Then you have a second or the middle block, which is NLP, which is natural language processing, which is any chatbots that you use where you get an automated response. How does a language which can be full of slang, it can be full of sarcasm, it can have emojis, it can also be disjointed. You might talk about one thing and then talk about another. So how do you process somebody talking in a or chatting in a natural form and convert it into something where a computer can respond on, right? So that's where NLP comes into play. And NLP has different components. One is you have to understand what a person is saying. So on a chatbot, you want to understand the kind of conversations they're having. But once you've understood that, then also generate a text or generate an audio which will make some sense to the person you're talking to, right? So there is also a natural language generation part of it. So there is within NLP, there is NLU, which is natural language understanding, where you understand what is being said, and natural language generation, which is generating so that somebody can understand it as well, right? So those two components work together, and you might feel that talking on the phone and somebody responding is a big step up from chatting on the computer and getting a response. Both these scenarios are very similar. There's not a huge amount of difference. The only difference is when you talk on the phone with an IVR or on a call center and there is an automated response, there's just one flip of a switch where they convert your audio into basically text. So it's called speech to text, and that conversion then basically can be used for your chat process as well, right? So there's just one difference in the two mediums, not that significant as it might seem. Last one is image and video analytics, which is, and I'll talk about a few examples of these as well, which is how do you use computer vision? We talked about that camera on Ring Road that we have, right? That is an example of image and video analytics. There are also examples of firms using it, say for example, for not facial recognition, that's a different topic, but basically security or understanding within a warehouse or a factory what is happening, right? Or even within a retail shop, which all places a person is going, right? So for example, if you go to a big supermarket, which aisles are getting the most amount of traffic? Do customers go to grocery first, then they go and take home cleaning products, and then they go and buy ice creams, and then they check out, right? So what is the route people take? So rather than somebody manually doing it, you have computer vision, which is basically a CCTV camera connected to an AI engine, which then processes the routes that different people take, right? So that's the idea behind image and video analytics as well, right? Facial recognition also then comes back to our point around how do you trust that if somebody is using facial recognition, it's going to be used for the right purposes, right? And privacy is an important factor. So if governments have access to facial recognition data, say for example from Facebook or other places, then how do you govern it and then make sure it is being used for the right purposes, right? So that's another aspect of which is more relevant for image and video analytics, not necessarily that much for NLP, right? So with that, those three broad areas are the ones we're talking of, but how do you apply it, right? So what's the use of these three specific areas? Any questions, feel free to ask. Nikunj is gonna prompt me and let me know, yeah? I'm gonna trust that you're gonna help me with that. Okay, so moving on. So if you look at human intelligence, now there are aspects of things which are, so on the x-axis, you have things like administration, skill, and leading. Now, what it basically means is the kind of tasks that we do, some are very administrative in nature, right? So which is stuff like, I don't want to say in terms of completely automated, so stuff that a CA does, right? So looks at your documents, your income tax returns, looks at your bank statement, looks at the rules that the government has, and then gives a recommendation or fills up a form for ITR and then submits it, right? And the example I'm giving of that is because I literally did that last week. I'm a bit delayed on my ITR returns, but something that I did very recently, right? So a lot of it is lying between administration and skill. Administration can also be about somebody stamping a file, validating if the page is filled up correctly in a government office, right? Then skill is a place where there is like the credit assessment that I was talking about, right? Which is some amount of skill is needed to understand whom to approve for a credit card or a loan. Now AI can help there as well. And then there is cutting edge leading work, which is, say for example, in research. And I'll give you a very interesting piece which was being done around building out new products for a drinks company. So one trend which was coming up around a couple of years back was people were looking for alternative sugary drinks, right? So sweet drinks which do not necessarily have artificial sugar in it, right? So there was this huge wave around artificial sweeteners and how they might impact your health. So that came up as a chatter, right? So now what could be alternatives or what could my competition be doing? So AI can actually help, in this case, help mine all the patents that different firms were filing, all the news that was coming up around this topic, and in social media, what people were talking about. So you identify a white space, and then we realize that there is something around herbal or infusion of sweet herbs or honey that people are more amenable towards as compared to artificial sweeteners. and a lower volume of that is something that they're looking for, right? So identifying a white space where a new product can be built is basically research work, right? But AI can help augment it. Now, whether that insight is helpful in building a product or not, that's still something somebody has to decide, right? So what happens in that case is we're augmenting what somebody might be doing in cutting edge or leading research, versus when you're looking at administration, we are largely automating that stuff, right? So administrative could also be in factories where there are machines which are now doing welding and assembly of cars, versus somebody who was manually doing that, right? So things where there is processing and simple inputs coming in, simple queries and FAQs on chatbots, all of that is administrative work. So we basically uh, try and do an automation around that, right? But where there is more uncertainty, there is some amount of expertise, or I'll say some gap in terms of decision clarity. That's when you need an augmented solution which can advise you, it can give you support to enable you to build that solution, right? So different areas and how AI can be implemented and where it is used. Yeah. So that's the idea behind the application of it. Now, if I look at how machine learning has progressed on this, right? And the journey for AI has also gone through the same process, where it began with simple process simplification. The origin of why people wanted to do digital change was to do simplification of processes. You set up some amount of analytics around it, and then you apply some robotic automation around it. Now, robotic automation is basically, it's not actual robots, but it's basically software code to automatically do a few steps on your computer. So rather than somebody else doing it, use some bit of intelligence to automate that stuff, right? And eventually it led to creating, rather than doing something which is ad hoc in nature, you build something which is off the shelf AI, which can then be used for doing large scale changes, right? And for places which are really unique and niche, like the example I was talking about for research, then you build custom ML models around those, right? So that's the spectrum of evolution that that AI has also gone through, right? So what are the different ways in which machine learning works or machines work, right? So three different areas. One is supervised learning, second is unsupervised learning, and then there is reinforcement based learning, right? So any thoughts on, so before you read the text and all that, I talk about, any thoughts on if you've heard about supervised, unsupervised, or reinforcement learning? Any examples of those that you might have heard about? So let me help out. So let me at least clarify what they are, and then maybe you can apply and think through which all areas they work in, right? So supervised learning is basically when you have a specific task in mind, right? You have a lot of data and you know what you want to do with that data, right? And that action of doing something, or what is called as an output, is basically called as a target variable, or you have a target in mind which you want to teach the machine to learn on, right? Now there are different techniques which are used in this. It can go from something as simple as logistic regression to machine learning models like SVM or random forest, to as high as deep learning as well, right? The idea being you're telling your AI model, or you have a way in which you can pick the right AI model, and that AI model now trains on solving this specific problem, right? It's not trying to understand the complexity of the data or underlying patterns. It's trying to basically using the supervision you provided on what you want to target. That's what it is picking up and using for building the AI model, right? So that's where the training is actually happening, right? And you need that clearly defined. It's based on historical data where you picked and collected all that information. You then clean up that data as a process, and then you augment it with a target variable. You define what your target variable is, and then you build a AI model around it, right? And I know there is a case study that you guys are trying to solve. You have a forecasting model where you have to predict something. Now, even in that case, you will have a target in mind, right? Which is the future forecast that you want to do. And then you'll have a set of data sets or data elements or features which will help you predict that forecasted outcome that you want to build out, right? So that's supervised learning, which is being used there. Unsupervised learning is when you want to understand what the data is saying. So you don't know all the problems that the data can solve. You want to understand underlying structure, underlying data patterns that are there, and you want the machine to actually explore and identify what those patterns are, right? And that's usually an example of that is clustering that we do to identify new segments in the underlying data. So you're not telling the machine in this case what to target for. You're telling it that this is the layout of my data. Go and find pockets of concentration or pockets of patterns that you can see and tell me what those patterns are. Now, I as human will then infer how those patterns can be used. I as human will then find out what use cases it might be used for, right? And I'll give you examples of how both of these are applied in practical industry. But that's the second example of it. The third one is what we call as reinforcement learning. Now, the interesting thing in this is you create a virtual environment for the machine to learn it. And what I mean by virtual environment, you define rules, right? So you create a structure in which AI can play with, right? And what I mean by playing is it takes a step, it decides on taking a step in that environment. And based on that action, it can then see whether that action was in the right direction or not. The environment tells it so, and it takes that feedback and automatically learns, right? And just to give you an example, think of, so you have these automated vacuum cleaners, right? Or robots that you have, which basically go around the room and clean by itself. Maybe not that prominent in India, but definitely in countries where there is a lot of carpeting there, there are robots which basically go and clean the carpets automatically, right? Now there is an environment in which they work. So for example, if it's going and hitting a wall, it is getting a feedback that, okay, this is the boundary of the wall. I need to turn around and go back and clean rest of it, right? So it got there is a reward and then there is a penalty. So the penalty was that, okay, you can't go ahead, learn from this. You need to go back and figure out where else you can go, right? So the first time it goes and does this randomly. It goes and bumps in different corners. It uses LiDAR or a laser radar to understand what is in the environment. And then it bakes it into its algorithm to say, okay, now I can go and figure out which all areas I need to go and clean, which I don't want to do, right? So that's an example of what reinforcement learning is. So I talked about these three areas, and I just want to hear from you guys. Any application that you see of these, and I think it's important to understand where you apply what kind of algorithm in real life as well. So if you have any thoughts on where you've seen supervised learning being used, unsupervised learning, reinforcement learning, you would have seen some examples of it as well.
Right, sir. I'd like to bring up a question here about compliance monitoring. Jwala Singh asks, how can we help a computer to learn law and make decisions based on that?
So defining laws is pretty straightforward, right? So if you have, say, for example, and I'll talk about ethics in AI as well, right? So there is a hard defined law which is easy to do. So for example, I can say that you should not decline somebody purely based on race, right? Or purely based on age. That's a law, and regulation mandates that I cannot decline a loan or a credit card to a person only because they are of a particular race or a gender or location that they live in, right? And it's easy to codify because you'll have a field which will say age, you'll have a field which will say gender, and you make sure when your AI model is built, you don't include those fields in that AI model. So it's an easy exclusion part of it, right? The interesting piece is that sometimes a lot of these come as unconscious bias in the AI models, right? Which may be because of the way you have built up that data in the past. You might not explicitly tell the AI model to create a bias in it, but it automatically comes in. So for example, some X country, let's say Bahrain, right? Or let's say Austria, they did not have a law around being conscious about whether loans are being given to people of a particular race, right? Or of a particular gender. They were fine with banks excluding males or females or of a particular racial category from their lending practice. Now, at some point of time, they changed that law and said, okay, no, we need to do this right. We need to put a regulation, make sure banks don't keep on doing this right. So some date, they go and fix that, right? Now, after that date, your data will tell you something else. Now you will start seeing people of different races, of different genders coming into your pool. But if you build your model on your old data, which was before this rule, right? Unconsciously, even though you have not put age or gender or race as a category, that data by itself will be biased. And when you build a model on that biased data and you use it now in the future, it will go back to the old ways. Even though explicitly you never said that you go and differentiate on this basis, right? So one is, whenever there is a law, it is easy enough to codify it, right? You can make sure that your data is not doing it. But there is this whole field of AI which is coming up, which is around ethics in AI, right? Making sure that your AI is being used on the right data. First, very important, you need to use it on the right data, make sure there are no biases. Second is the use of AI is also for a good purpose, right? So the purpose it is being used for, it should not differentiate, it should not exclude, it should not be used for the harm of humanity as well, right? So very important aspect. So one is you can control on the data side. Second is you can control on what you are using it for, right? So probably a topic for another day and a very detailed conversation we guys can have. But I think codifying is easy. Being conscious of the biases that might creep in unintentionally is the hard part, right? Which all AI modelers, as you come into the field or as analytics professionals, you need to be aware of it, right? And you need to have different tests by which you can check whether your AI model is biased or not, right? So something as simple as doing a check on the distribution of people approved versus declined will give you an idea of what the model is doing, right? So that's the idea behind it. So, so coming back, 3 areas: supervised, unsupervised, reinforcement learning. I see one which is okay. So reinforcement learning, Google Maps, to some extent, yes. Automated driving or autonomous driving vehicles, like what Tesla has, autopilot, right? Those are reinforcement learning based models where it has multiple sensors in terms of proximity sensors. It has cameras in different parts of the car to see if, say, for example, a pedestrian is going right in front and the camera detects it. It feeds it back to the AI model saying there is an obstacle and the obstacle is a human. So apply the brakes as hard as you can, right? And similarly, if there are markings on the road, then it can see that which lane you are in. It may not apply in India with the random driving style that we guys have and the quality of markings, but in places where they are there, it's a feedback which comes in as an input to the AI model, and then you can define how best to drive in that scenario, right? So that's the reward part of it, right? Similarly, there was an interesting application of reinforcement learning where you don't tell what the model has to do. So for example, there used to be this game called as Arkanoid. I don't know if you guys know what it is. It's basically a bar at the bottom of the screen, and then you have these blocks at the top, and then a ball goes and hits the block and hits it, and then rebounds back. Wherever it hits, the block evaporates and you get some pointers for your bar at the bottom. And the more you hit and the more bars you make or blocks you evaporate at the top, the better you're doing at the game, right? So the AI model in that case was given a virtual environment. It said, okay, so what you can do is that bar at the bottom, you can go and actually, let me just try and see if I can pull up an image to make it clearer. Hold on a second. Okay, I think I have it. Can you see this on the screen?
Yes, sir.
So basically there is a bar at the bottom, there is a ball which goes and hits these blocks on the top. And you have to basically move the bar left and right and make sure the ball doesn't go below you, right? And you lose a life every time it goes down. So the interesting thing in reinforcement learning, what was done was the AI model was told that this is a device you can control, you can go left and right at some speed, and that's it, right? Now, it was not told that you have to play this game, you have to do well at this game, that you have to go and hit these blocks. And then when the ball hits the blocks, they evaporate. So the first thing that it did was over a period of time, it learned that it hit so the ball goes up and it goes down and the game ends. So it realizes, okay, this is a short scenario. I need to probably last longer in this. So the ball goes and hits the block. It comes back. It moves the bar on the right. It doesn't succeed, right? So thousands of scenarios it tries. It figures out the way the ball is coming back. I need to move my bar in that direction. So that's first stage of learning, right? And it keeps on doing this, and it's become very efficient at basically keeping the ball in play, right? The next level of thing which it did, which surprised a lot of researchers, was the quickest way to play this game is you basically clear out the blocks on one side of this screen, and you make the ball go back on top towards the screen, and it basically automatically clears all these blocks on its own, and then when it comes down, half the blocks are gone, right? So that's something that the AI model learned on its own, which really surprised the researchers, that with reinforcement learning, it didn't just learn how to play this game, it also learned that there are strategies on how to do this quickly, which is if you create a route to the top of the screen, it can automatically go there and then clean up these blocks by itself, right? So that's an example of reinforcement learning. Now, not a lot of practical use, but imagine the strategy that it has learned. It can also go and learn new strategies beyond this as well, right? Which is what happened with AlphaGo as well, right? So strategies which absolutely make no sense to us humans, but in the end, in the long con, it helps the computer win, right? So that's an example of reinforcement learning. Similarly, unsupervised learning is with when you want to create segments, right? You want to understand segments of customers or population that you have and how they behave is what is primarily the underlying need for it, right? So for example, if you have survey done for a sensor survey done, right? And you have all this rich data which has come in. Now you want to understand what the underlying population is, right? You'll apply clustering and you create new segments and profile them to understand what they are saying, right? Supervised learning, we talked about a few examples which were there, right? Which is basically a targeted solution where you have to either predict or forecast or build something specific in nature. So any comments, any questions on this before we move ahead?
Well, I think we had one comment by Shubhra, where she was taking a guess at reinforcement learning, where she said Google Maps is also one example where if you take a wrong route, it redirects you, and so on.
Yeah, I think it's a mix of both. So there is one optimization which is happening in the background. So it's automatically optimizing it. But yeah, I think if you look at it from a sensory point of view, you're right. I think there is reinforcement that is happening, that if you change the route, then it is recommending something else to you. It is not necessarily learning on the spot, but it is telling you what's the best route in the future given your current state, right? So interesting would be if people keep on taking a service lane, which happens on our NH8. If you try to come from Gurgaon to Delhi, if the main highway is blocked, people start taking the service lane to try and avoid that traffic jam. If a lot of people do that, then is the algorithm able to learn and start recommending the service lane also as an alternative option, right? Which it then picks up over a period of time. So that would be a case of a reinforcement based learning as well. There's a question on how long it can take India to invent self-driving cars or self-driving cars on street? Is it possible in near future? I think most important is evolution of both. One is in terms of AI, of cars being able to handle unstructured and unexpected situations. Because right now, wherever self-driving cars are, they are largely in very structured environments, on highways where there are clear demarcations and road signs. So infra probably has to go up. I think the best places would be expressways where self-driving cars will be there to come up first. And second is for AI models to evolve to handle a lot more unstructured or unexpected situations which will come up. I'm sure India will have its own nuances of different animals being on the streets while you're driving, or random driving behaviors that we have. So how do you learn those, which will be very different than some of the Western countries which are there, right? So it'll be an interesting problem to solve. How far in the future? I'll say probably 5 years or so, or lesser than that. We should have trials already running in India in enclosed environments now for some of the automobile manufacturers. Now to get it into real life and out in the street is what will take some time. Okay, perfect. So let's get on to the next topic. So one is on the AI models, which we talked about. The other piece, which I think is also interesting, is how do you apply this AI at scale, right? So even though you're building these individual AI models, the idea is that you want to create value for your firm or for an organization that you're working for, or even for yourself if you're doing your own work. You want to make sure it is scalable, right? And it can grow. So for that, you have to take these models from theory to a software code to something which can be deployed in real life as well, right? So that's what I'm going to focus a bit more on in the second half of this session. But yeah, so yeah, the key aspect of basically going from traditional data and insights which we had is which will give you dashboards, it will give you some descriptive models in Excel or other standard tools like R. How do you go from there to something which is much more advanced? There are analytics or AI models which are based on machine learning, and then deploy those at scale so that you can create more value for the organization, right? So till the point you're sitting with a good AI model, you've shown a lot of accuracy and uplift from the model in both training and testing. Till the time you deploy it, it doesn't add a lot of value, right? So the key thing which all enterprises are, or firms that, or clients that I talk to, they have this common theme running for them, which is how do we become a cognitive enterprise, right? Which is basically not just have AI models for the name of it, but actually deploy them where they can be acted upon and where they can be decisions taken based on that, right? So that's where the cognitive enterprise as a key focus for firms is coming up as well, right? So 4 things which is making this shift a lot more easier, right? Which is a combination of data, technology, and people. One is, and I think the reason why we're also having this talk is there is more focus on AI and analytics, right? It is not just about experimenting and trying a few things. It's about making sure you bring it to life and get it at scale, right? Second is there is higher amount of focus on or importance of data which is being given. So earlier, data used to be a byproduct of what a firm does, right? So for example, if I'm a consumer goods company like Hindustan Unilever or Pepsi, data was a byproduct which was being captured by systems. Now firms actually make a conscious effort to generate new data as well, right? So there are manufacturing firms which put sensors in place to capture new data on how the assembly line is going, right? Or you might have sensors embedded in cars which look at how you are using the accelerator or the brake. So for example, Maruti has this own app or a smart app for monitoring how your driving style has been. It can give you feedback. Yeah, it can tell you what your driver score is. It can tell you how your driving pattern has been. So there is more interest in generating data and capturing it so it can be used for AI as well. Right? That's the second key part. Third is there is more focus on growing top line, which is how do I grow my business more than worrying about small costs that might be involved in setting up a platform and the AI around it. Right? Last bit, which is not the least important, is basically there is huge shortage of skills in this area, right? I think there is a lag in terms of when industry realizes there is a need for this skill and by when people will be ready for it, right? So it's more about understanding what kind of talent we want to grow over a period of time in this industry, giving that input across the board. So when people come on as part of IBM, as part of our onboarding process, there is a huge amount of focus on making sure that they understand how their talent will be groomed and what all areas they have an aspiration towards or what all options might be available for them, right? So it's no longer about making sure you have your employees be most productive. It is also significantly about how do you groom that talent, because these skills are not always readily available, right? So if you choose this as a career option, first of all, let me say this upfront, huge opportunities. So if any of you are leaning towards analytics and AI, I'll definitely encourage that. It's my passion, so you'll always find me in that corner. But also, I think if you're choosing this as a field, the colleges that you are in or the colleges that you will be in or what you're studying are also a very significant enabler for this, right? So most of the places have either some inkling of coding or AI or analytics baked into curriculum as well. So for example, if you're trying to do economics, right? So econometric modeling is something that you might be doing, right? That's a stepping stone towards analytics as well. That's how I started as well with basic econometric modeling. But the idea being that the education system has a huge role to play in this. You as folks have to be excited about this as a field, right? And then it's for organizations like us in IBM to basically help you grow your talent and your skills once you come on board. So I'll say these four areas have come together to enable firms to focus on being a cognitive enterprise. And from an aspiration point of view, this field has huge growth potential and very interesting challenges to work upon as well. Yeah. So the way we typically design these cognitive enterprise solutions is, and this is how it works in production, right? In real life, this is not where you build a model and you see some output and that is enough for you. What you want to do is you want to design your AI models for an end experience you want to create, which is either for a customer, for an employee, or for your internal management as well. You define based on what you want to create in an experience, the outcomes that are needed, right? And then you quantify the outcome value that will come from it and understands the risk which will be there. So risk can be in terms of, for example, ethics piece we talked about. Risk can be in terms of performance not being met, right? And then you continuously iterate and you improve on that model, right? So the idea is it's not a one-time process. So analytics models are not just built once and left to die their own natural death, right? Because actually, any guesses on why do you think models deteriorate with time? Let me ask you this. Any thoughts on why we need to iteratively, continuously improve and revisit models? So once you've trained a model and it's put, new challenges come up, yes. So the situations might be different. That's one, absolutely. Yeah, the data might change. So you might be getting, your pipelines might be perfect earlier, but there might be errors which might creep up. So you might want to fix those. Customers change, right? What we were pre-COVID to where we are post-COVID, our buying patterns have completely changed, right? So, and that's also led to a huge amount of adoption in terms of digital and AI, maybe a topic for another day, but environment around you, situation, persona people like Dakshta is saying, they also change, right? So if people were buying from a physical grocery store earlier, now there is a lot more openness to order from Big Basket or from Amazon Fresh, right? Which was not there earlier. So now how do you understand people who were never shopping with you suddenly start coming on your portal and then ordering all these things, right? Who are these people? If your AI models remain stable and they are not trained and iteratively improved, and you're not monitoring what is happening with them or measuring how effective they are, you would not be able to address these new customers which are coming, right? Or how the situation is changing. Now with lockdowns lifting, the patterns are shifting again, right? So people now have an hybrid approach. They'll buy some things offline, they'll buy some things online, right? So what is this new normal that has come in, right? How do you understand that? How do your AI models learn? It's through this cycle of training and continuously improve, right? Any other examples you can think of where there is this cyclical nature of continuously learning and improving? So COVID, I took a very broad example, but any place else where you think something has changed because of which AI has to relearn? So I'll give you an example, right? So a new product, say for example, is getting launched, which did not used to exist earlier. So for example, if Tesla comes to India and they launch a product, in the first few months, people who will buy versus a couple of years down the line when they'll have a cheaper model come in, then who are these customers, right? Or any new product launch which comes in. So for example, if there is automated dishwashers, right? Which a lot of people were not buying before COVID, but post COVID, they saw a huge amount of uplift in terms of wait times on when dishwashers might be available. So again, a completely new demographic of people moved away from maids to buying dishwashers to take care of cleansing of utensils at home, right? Same concept with e-commerce as well. New consumer personas, new geographies. If you open in, then how do you understand that? So that's where scenarios change, environment changes, and your customer persona also changes. So I think that's one key theme to remember. I think it will help you that don't think of an AI model as something being static and fixed and marked in stone. It is continuously learning and improving. And even when you build your models, keep in mind as new data comes in, you need to continuously train it. And if you don't have a system in which new data is coming in, that's a gap in your deployment. You need to make sure that you have this feedback loop for all the AI models that are built out, right? So I think and there are a few more things I can talk about, but I think I want to take a pause and see if there are questions. But like I said, actually not me, but Peter Parker said that in Spider-Man, right? With great power comes great responsibility. AI has huge, tremendous potential, right? To both increase effectiveness and delivery timelines, which can be improved by it, but it needs to be applied in a intelligent and a strategic way, right? And when you're looking at making sure that you have focus on this as an area that you want to grow in, keep in mind that there are multiple different areas where AI analytics is now deployed in across different industries. So do you want to focus on a specific industry that you want to grow in? Do you want to be somebody who wants to get into research for analytics and AI to build new algorithms? Or you want to look at more practical applications of it? So today I focus more on the latter part, which is talking about how AI is applied in different scenarios and how it impacts us in day out. And I think if you have an interest in this area, feel free to reach out. But I'll recommend one book if you guys have the time to read it. It's by Melanie Mitchell. It's called as Artificial Intelligence for Thinking Humans, I believe, something of that sort. That's a very good introduction to the field. It does go into some technicalities, but it explains, or she explains it really well, what AI is and where it is headed. So if you do have an interest in the area, I'll highly recommend that book. Obviously, you can get a lot of articles and publications outside, but that's a book that I really liked when it came out because it explains it for anyone who's ready to apply their mind. and learn and be open about it, it's a very good book to look at. So with that, I'll take a pause, see if you guys have any questions that you want me to answer, whether it is about AI analytics as a field or a specific problem that you're trying to solve. And I can give you pointers on how to solve that. We can discuss that too. Or if you have questions about IBM or kind of things that we do, happy to answer that as well.
Right. So we can take up some questions now, if that's okay with you. And obviously, participants can keep putting their questions in the chat box. We'll start off with a few questions that we had.
Sure.
First of all, you talked about the pandemic, sir. How did your business adapt to it? What challenges did you challenges did you identify? How did you help your clients to adapt to those challenges through AI and analytics?
Absolutely. So I think there is a question for. Let me just address that. I was just typing it out. I'm at least generating a lot of business for Melanie Mitchell. I actually recommend this book at multiple places, but I just typed out the name of the book if you have an interest in buying it. But coming back to the question, so one is, although the pandemic has had very depressing outcomes, it's impacted, I think, most of us personally as well as emotionally as well, in a lot of negative ways. But the field for digitization and for AI and analytics has shown that it is something that is ready to step up, and it's grown significantly due to that. Just to give you an example, right, when the COVID lockdown started, and this is not just in India and global as well, and I think when I started off this business close to 6 years back around new age data and new age AI, there was not a lot of application for understanding how consumer shopping patterns are changing, right? So how do you use external data to understand what your consumers are doing with the competition? But just to give an example, when lockdowns happen, right, or when they start opening up, there are data sources which tell you which are places you are going to, right? So basically your footfall data and tracking through your mobile phone. There are companies who sell that data, which basically say, if you're going to a shopping mall, or if you're going to a stadium, or you're going to a grocery store close by, or you're going to your relative's house, you're able to track where people are going, right? And as an example, the practical application of it is, if you are shopping for a new TV, you can understand, for an LG store, if you go to a Samsung store, if you go to an MI store, then these firms can understand who of my existing customers are going to a competition. But in COVID, the same data can help you understand which areas are showing higher amount of people stepping out. It's called as mobility index. Google also has a version of it. And if you've not looked at it, you might want to go and see, right? It's very interesting set of insights. It tells you how people are stepping out in different areas. So even though government is lifting lockdowns, are people truly stepping out? And can firms now start planning for which kind of products to put in which stores? So from a CPG firm perspective, what kind of SKUs, what kind of products do I want to put in small grocery stores? What kind of products do I want to put in supermarkets? Because people may not be going to supermarkets because they are air conditioned, right? When lockdowns are lifted, they might go to grocery stores, or they might do ordering from these online platforms. Then I don't need to store all these products in these supermarkets. I need to store them in warehouses from where these online platforms can sell, or to these localized grocery stores, right? So that's one application area of it. With COVID, there is also, most of the signals from consumers are muted, right? So people are not visiting your store, or they're not visiting a bank branch. You don't get to do a face-to-face interaction with them, right? So what are consumers thinking? What are they worried about? What are their needs? What are their wants? How do you understand that, right? So now all of that data shifts to digital. They are searching for things. You get up in the morning and you search for, say, for example, COVID cases in my city, right? You search for infection rates, and that's something that you can see change over a period of time. As COVID comes into focus, it goes out of focus. Then how do you help firms manage that, right? Understand what the consumer needs and patterns are, because You can no longer send people out on a survey who are going door to door trying to understand consumer behavior. You do it digitally now, and AI models are helping you do that. So that's another example of how we've helped clients. We've actually helped them understand consumer behavior, help them understand what is changing with them, and help them plan better so that they can fulfill the needs of end consumers, both in terms of getting right products to them, but also getting them at the right time. Because some of these are essential goods which are truly needed day in, day out. You cannot run away from it.
Right, sir. I'll just take one more question, perhaps then you can continue with your presentation. You talked about trust, sir. So there are companies who've had traditional business models, they haven't incorporated data much, and they're slow adopters in general. So how do you convince those sort of clients to shift towards AI? How do you bridge that trust deficit, and how do you make sure that you're accounting for certain biases also?
Okay, so one is hesitancy in terms of adapting AI. So you need to ask yourself why that is the case. Is it because they feel AI is a big animal and it's going to need a large amount of investment, or they don't understand where AI can be helped with, right? Or where AI can have an application. So the way we typically recommend is, I'll also show you a slide now for that since the question is there. We typically say that you can think big and we can help you with that to understand where AI can be applied, but you need to start small. You need to start with a small pilot, assess what data you have, prove it out, run a few MVPs, or what is called as minimum viable product, or run a few pilots to see how effective AI can be. We'll show you the value that is there. When you see the value coming out of that engagement, now whether it is you building an AI model for a chatbot, will automate a process for you. Just a small part of it will show you how effective it is. And once you've seen that, then you scale it out, right? We've shown you the ROI, you got the returns. Now you've got a business case which you can go and get further funding on. And then we will help you scale and get this AI to production at scale, right? So that's the typical way on how most of the engagements begin. If somebody is worried about investments, this solves that problem. If somebody is worried about outcomes, we can talk about other places where we have done similar work and the outcomes they have seen, right? So the good news is that a lot of firms are open to these ideas, which they might not have been a couple of years back, right? So that hesitancy is going down for sure.
Right, sir. We have one question in the chat box as well. We'll just take that up. Dakshta asks about how building sales funnels are inclined towards more automated structures. So is this the future for the industry? I mean, I think this refers to marketing in specific, but if you could answer that.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand. Okay. So sales funnel, if you look at it, so first of all, when you say automated sales funnel or a funnel structure, different industries have different ways to handle it, right? So I can probably take two extreme examples and talk about it. So sales funnel for, say, for example, a consumer goods company, which is large scale, and they wanna, for them, the selling they do is to distributors, but let's simplify it and let's say end consumers is you and me. Then for them, you're right, the sales funnel is targeted towards promoting a particular brand or a product across different channels, which can be on websites you go to, it can be on social media, it can be on TV, on the ads that you guys see, and it can also be newspaper ads that they send out, right? So they do want to create an automated process because the ticket size is small, the purchase is very frequent, so you need to continuously keep on doing it. And you then over a period of time start trusting the brand and you automatically keep on buying that product, right? Another example of it is cryptocurrencies, which is I have a pet peeve with how it is being handled in India. But investments like they are trying to do with promotions and targeting audiences which may not be that sophisticated in terms of understanding financials, there is this aspect of how much of it is ethical and how much of it is right. But they're also trying to create this wave of automated sales funnel. And then Based on the data they can get, they can build for their AI models and learn and expand from that. Then there are discrete purchases like cars, like houses, which are significant in nature. That's also where AI plays a role, where you can now understand from the people who have bought from you in the last 1 year, what is the profile for them, right? You understand what kind of car model, for example, they're interested in. There is a profile which is interested in large SUVs. There's a profile which is interested in electric vehicles, right? So who are those customers? So AI can help you identify the right personas to target, and then you go and send out a campaign to them, get them automatically fed into your sales funnel to do that. So the approaches for where the ticket sizes are small, there are continuous regular purchases versus where there are discrete one-off large purchases, the approach for AI is different. And the idea being that whatever is the outcome of it, eventually it comes into your sales funnel, helps you expand it and makes it, if you truly see a funnel, it makes it thicker as well. So from the top to the bottom, you want to make sure all the customers go through. From there, it makes it thicker and it makes it wider, right? That's the idea for AI to step in. I'm not sure if I answered the question correctly, but that's the understanding that I could get out of the text, but let me know.
Sure, sir. I think that makes sense to me. We can take up questions as they come, but for now, I think we can move on.
Then I think we have a few minutes left only. I think we have a couple of minutes, but happy to answer any other questions. And you do have my connect, feel free to reach out. And on LinkedIn as well, happy to connect. And like I said, I think this is just the stepping stone towards going more deeper into the field. If you need more background and we want a deeper session on a specific topic, happy to come back and talk to you guys. But like I said, go and explore, there are plenty of courses that are there on digital platforms, whether it's Coursera or Udacity. You can go and learn about AI and ML. Start with beginner courses, try and dabble a bit with coding if you want to. But there are also other orthogonal areas which are more aligned towards the creative aspect of AI as well, which might be something you want to focus on as well. So it's a very exciting field. As always, I'm very passionate and excited about talking about it. So best of luck to you. And if you do want to try it out, I'm sure you'll have a very successful future as well.
Right, sir. I think we have a couple of minutes left. So if we are at the end of the presentation, I can go ahead and ask you some questions then.
Sure. We have a couple of minutes. We can spend the time on it.
Yes, sir. So you talked about what is going to be automated versus what is going to be augmented, right? So how do you see the future of our workforce evolving side by side to how AI capability is being adopted?
So different areas will get automated first and faster. So for example, the ones, like I said, administrative in nature. The next set, which is probably going to come up, is probably automations in finance, which can be CAs, it can be in terms of wealth advisors and financial planning. There are already waves happening in US and in some parts of Europe around autonomous driving, taking away jobs from truck drivers. But I think the aspect is whenever that has happened, there is a shift which has happened due to automation or due to AI. There are new opportunities also created, right? So there are opportunities for using the same capability or using AI in new areas. So people get skilled in new areas and new job opportunities come along with it. So definitely the ones which are more administrative in nature, which are repetitive by design, where you have boundaries and rules clearly articulated, those are the ones which will get automated first, right? Probably sometime in the next few years. So for example, medical field is also going through that transformation. The entire medical transcription area, which is trying to understand what notes doctors are taking, automating that process, giving it as an input to doctors, or recommending based on what patients' symptoms are, what is the right advice, and the areas that a doctor can explore in, is first stepping stone. Then there might be in the future some kind of a general physician as well, which is automated to some extent, where given a few indicators and tests, it can give you some idea on what disease or what treatment you might want to take. So that field is much more skill based, expertise and experience is very important in capturing it. So it will take more time to get there. But I think some areas which are repetitive, like I said, they will gravitate towards it. It will give opportunities to us as humans to move towards more intellectually engaging jobs, to ones which are more enriching than the administrative ones which are
there. Right, sir. I think we can wrap up with one last question.
Sure.
How do you see the future? Is it becoming less personalized because the lack of human touch, or is it becoming hyper personalized because AI, to some extent, understands our preferences better than we ourselves do?
Yeah, very interesting take on it. So it depends on how you define personalization. I think there is an angle of emotion in it. So if I truly talk about
So we've lost you.
The fashion is exactly as you would need in terms of a cloth or a product you're trying to buy. And it can be hyper personalized, like you said, down to an individual. We can actually say what your specific needs are, right? But also how do you deliver it is a very important aspect, right? So you can freak people out by being very specific, by saying that I know that you like a jacket of this color and this button, and that's why I'm recommending it to you. You can also then create a personal connect as well, which is how do you handle the emotional aspect of it, right? So the way you communicate is very important, and the channel you use for communication is very important. It might look very robotic, it might look very impersonal, even though the product is personalized for you. If you deliver it through, say, for example, a chatbot or through a portal, if it is not messaged correctly, even for somebody at a call center, when a customer calls up, you have a very rich array of information about them. You don't go and parrot the entire thing to them, right? How do you react to them? How do you make it more personable? Is the aspect which is essential when the delivery happens, right? So it's not just about how much you can customize and personalize. It's the emotional aspect of it, of how you deliver it, that is very important.
Right, sir. Thank you for your answer. I think that brings us to the end of this workshop. Thank you, sir, for taking out your valuable time to conduct this workshop. I think I can speak for everyone in the audience when I say that we're leaving this session with a better contextual understanding of some esoteric terms that we use around in our daily conversations, but we really don't understand what they mean. And you've done a great job at explaining that through practical use cases. Thank you for that, sir. We'd also like to thank IBM for making this workshop possible.